Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the April meeting of the Inland Wetlands Watercourse Commission. There's going to be a lot of people here tonight, so please be civil and let people speak when they're speaking. Let them finish, and this hopefully will go quickly, and we can make a decision. First thing is audience of citizens. Is there anybody here who has anything that's not on the agenda? I'd like to say something. Say your name, please, and your concern.
Yes, I'm David Lusick. I live at 106 Brownstone Road, and I need to address the statement made by Andy at the meeting last time. Here's a picture of my first arborvitae tree. Okay. Yellow line shows the end of the 35-foot conservation area. The arrow to the left is the conservation area. So I need to clarify that for everybody, that the first tree starts at the end, not what Andy said. Here's a picture with the facts. Send it to you guys and just show it to you.
We're going to have to find this. So can we?
It's the first tree. Yellow line shows the end of the conservation, and the black arrow is the conservation area. Thank you.
Yeah. Can we?
I missed the comment.
So, sir, your comment again, if you could just.
Andy presented false facts at the last meeting. He
facts.
said my trees were in violation of the 35-foot zone. There's a picture. He had no evidence showing anything last time.
Okay.
He talked out the top of his. Didn't present any facts.
There was a difference of opinion, is what you're saying.
Well, those are the facts with a picture. He just made a statement, a blank statement,
Okay.
with no evidence like usual.
Okay.
Can we find this? Can we postpone the?
Sure. Yeah.
Because I want to find out where it says this in the
Yeah,
minutes. I don't want to.
sure.
We don't have time to run through it. So,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, you can.
Anybody have any problem with that if we postpone the accepting of the minutes?
No, I don't have a problem with that.
Can I make a motion to that effect then?
Certainly.
Make a motion to wait for the next meeting to approve the minutes? Yeah. That second?
Second.
All in favor? Thank you. We'll look into this and make sure there's change. Okay, next is the public hearing on application 22-11W, proposal by Teresa Denardi to construct drainage improvements, discharge stormwater runoff within an upland review area on lot 88-1, block 91 at 359 Fort Rod Road. Can I have a motion to open a public hearing?
Make a motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. You want to first agenda on this? Okay.
All right, good evening. My name is Wilson Carroll, an attorney with Cohen and Wolf from Bridgeport, and I'm here tonight on behalf of Teresa Denardi of 359 Fort Rod Road. With me tonight is Eric Peterson, as last time from Gardner and Peterson Associates. He is the engineer who drafted the initial plan, as well as this amended plan and the drainage report, which you all have a copy of the drainage report. I guess I have copies here if anyone needs them. The drainage improvement plan proposes to relocate the discharge point from the town maintained culvert right here, which currently discharges water at the front of the Denardi property, to the rear of the property, right at the end of the green line there. This application is before you tonight because that new discharge point is within the upland review area, as referenced from the brook at the rear of the property. Now, this application was subject to the subject of a public hearing before this commission in January. At that meeting, we heard testimony from Ms. Denardi's neighbors and members of the public who were concerned that this application could increase the peak water flow to twin culverts, which run underneath Winding Meadow Drive, the bottom of the plan here, or otherwise have an impact on the watercourse to the rear of the Denardi property. You asked us to amend the plans to show more lots to the east, up to and including number 72, which is the property that has those two twin culverts, and to prepare a drainage report that details the current and proposed watershed conditions of the property. I'm happy to report that the proposal will not increase the peak flow to the twin culverts under Winding Meadow Drive, and it will not cause any change to the velocity or flow rate within the brook. And I'll turn it over to Eric Peterson, who's going to walk us through the drainage report and the amendments that he's made to.
Thank you, Wilson. For the record, Eric Peterson, professional engineer, Gardner Peterson Associates in Holland. First, I'd just like to point out that this little portion of the plan down here just matches up with the right side of the plan. So as you continue looking east, it's just pictured down there since our, which was why is it wasn't wide enough?
It's a match form.
Correct. So as Wilson mentioned, we made some revisions to the plan. We sent our field crew back out to the property and located the brook that runs through the back of the Denardi property and then meanders through a few of the rears of the properties off of Winding Meadow Drive. We located the culverts that go from the rear of these properties under Winding Meadow Drive, so we could determine their location. And we also recorded a few elevations in that general vicinity and plotted them on these plans. You will see, if you look closely at the plans, that the Denardi property is lower than all the properties on to the north along Winding Meadow, meaning that the elevations that we have all along the property line here and above the property line is higher than any elevations that we have on the Denardi property. Simply meaning that water exiting this pipe will continue in an easterly direction, not in a northerly direction and cross over those property lines, but get into the brook as we intended. So our drainage analysis was to look at how the installation of this green pipe here affects the flow in this brook and therefore in the culverts, since it's all connected. Our initial hypothesis was that the installation of that culvert will not cause any negative effects downstream. As Wilson mentioned, increase in velocities, increase in volume of water, increase runoff of water. So what we did is we utilized 2019 state imagery and 2016 topography that the state did to determine the watershed to this brook, going way down 4 Rod Road, looking at the ground covers within that watershed so we can determine and calculate a flow rate to the brook and to the culverts. We then did the same thing to the 12-inch culvert that discharges currently on the Denardi property. And then we took those watersheds and those analyses and we, for lack of a better term, added them together to see what the current conditions are, to see what is happening currently at this location here at the brook, at the culverts. Then we did the exact same thing, except for adding in the new pipe to see how that would affect our analysis. What we found that the installation of the culvert actually resulted in a very, very minor decrease in peak flow to the brook and therefore the culverts. The reason being is that we're not adding any more watershed area to these culverts. We're not changing any ground cover. We're just moving the water in a pipe as opposed to moving it on the ground. And when there's no increase in peak flow, there's no change, and there's also no change in the geometry of the brook, or the geometry and the size and slope of the culverts. There'll be no change in the velocity of the brook or the culverts of the water. There'll be no change in the depth of the water, and obviously in the flow rate, as I mentioned before. So based on all that information, it's our opinion that we're not going to have a negative effect on any flow in the culverts or the brook.
And just to conclude, I would refer you to the Inland Wetlands Regulation Section 10.2, which has the criteria under which these decisions should be made. And one of the factors, actually, I believe the only applicable factor is factor A. The agency shall take into consideration whether the environmental impact of proposed regulated activity on wetlands and water courses. And I would just conclude that there is no impact of this regulated activity to those wetlands and water courses. We respectfully ask that you approve the application. We're happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any?
How far is the discharge to the brook? From here to the brook? Let's see here. It's roughly about 70 feet or so.
That pipe you're putting in, is it an open, is it perforated or is it a solid pipe?
It's a solid pipe.
Okay. So the water coming from the street through the pipe is going to the brook.
And the only water that's in that pipe is the water that is going through the pipe that goes under the street.
Okay.
It's not picking up any more water.
And your claim is that it's not adding any more water to the brook.
That's correct.
What about the groundwater that's around the pipe on the outside? Where's that water going?
It's staying right where it is today. We're not picking up any groundwater in the pipe. It's a solid pipe, not perforated.
Okay, but where's the water going into the water that's going into the brook? Where's it coming?
The water that's going into the brook now,
Right.
where is it coming from?
Yeah.
Okay. There's water coming from the Winding Meadow lots.
Yeah.
That comes down onto the Denardi property and then flows to the brook.
Okay,
That's not changing. That's still gonna happen. There's water coming from Four Rod, or really not Four Rod Road, but to the west of Four Rod Road through this pipe. And that travels east to the brook. That's not changing. And then we've got this enormous watershed to the south, that climbs the big hill of Four Rod Road and whatnot. It comes down. There's even portions of properties on the west side of Four Rod Road that come over and cross. And that's all coming through that brook as well.
In the last couple of pages of the report have those watersheds mapped.
okay.
Is this a matter of taking water that would otherwise flow south across the property and then east to the brook? Instead of waiting for it to do that, you're running it through the pipe?
It's water that would come out of this pipe right here.
Yeah.
It stops right there and it flows east to the brook. That's what it does.
That's what it does now.
Yeah.
And
We're picking
why
it
is
up
that
here.
different with the pipe?
I'm saying it's not.
So why do it?
It will make a substantial portion of the lawn drier for more of the year. That's the only purpose.
Because none of that water will have the opportunity to migrate south before it migrates east.
The water that's currently discharged from this pipe will exit here instead of flowing from east to west over that portion.
Right now, Rick, it kind of meanders along that boundary line. There's certain areas where it probably flows into the properties to the north. It's wet, which this will eliminate that meandering of the water as it runs down towards the stream.
Because that's more or less a culvert now.
There's currently a culvert under the road here that stops right. It literally stops right there, or actually stops right here. I'm sorry.
But where the pipe is now, I think he's getting the pipe where the pipe is now. Is there a depression? Is there a swale?
There's a very minor depression, and sometimes it is more of a depression, and sometimes it's less of a depression. I think the water has kind of made its own path in certain areas, but it's definitely lower here than it is up here, and in spots it's lower here than it is, like by her house and whatnot.
Is that a buried pipe?
Currently, yes, and then it just discharges to the ground. It exposes itself.
No, I mean, the pipe you're adding.
Oh,
it's
yes,
gonna
yes.
be buried.
It is, yes. So what we're doing is actually getting it lower into the ground at this point up here so that we have cover over it. So it's not, we're not like making a big hump up there or anything like that. We're still allowing water from the ground to come onto us and head to the brook. Or from here to come onto this area. Just not in the pipe.
And the properties to the north are a higher elevation than your pipe
Correct.
discharge elevation.
Correct.
Then why are they complaining they have water in their backyards?
So my understanding, my guess on that is that the soils in this area are very tight and they don't accept water easily, meaning that when it rains, it takes a long, long time for water to percolate all the way to the ground. And that's why there's what some might call flooding, or some might call puddling. And then there's also the area by the end of the pipes here is also, I think, classified as being a flood zone.
May I ask you about peak flow? I understood you said that by the improvement there, the installation of the pipe, that the peak flow would actually decrease.
Mhm.
Now, can you define peak flow for me?
It is the calculated maximum volume flow of water, let's say in the pipe or in the brook.
Okay, and
And that's how we design culverts and make sure so that they can pass more or less the worst case scenario.
where is that point? Where is peak flow measured?
In this case, I measured it at the entrance to these two culverts.
Okay,
So that way I'm looking at the entire watershed, every drop of water that can get into those culverts.
okay. So just thinking this out, the ground surface is rougher than the pipe. The pipe is smooth
Mhm.
and there's less friction for the water. So I just don't understand how peak flow decreases with the installation of the pipe versus overland flow
Mhm.
on the ground surface.
It's a concept that we look at very frequently when we are, let's say we're designing something at the bottom of a watershed or maybe like in the vicinity of a large brook. Whereas you've got this enormous amount of land watershed that is contributing to this land, and towards the bottom of it, we're kind of, it's not this case, but I'm just trying to make my point.
Uh-huh.
Let's say we're adding a parking lot or something. So that adding a parking lot typically would add to the peak flow.
Right.
But if we can take that water from the parking lot and get it into the watershed before the peak comes down,
Uh-huh.
so you've got this big peak coming down
Ah,
and we're sneaking it in early.
I see your point.
And then, I mean, this case, it's very minute. That's why I said minor.
Uh-huh.
I don't think it's going to be negligible or noticeable by the
Uh-huh.
naked eye, but that's what the calculations result in.
So you're saying the area of contribution from the watershed is, the stormwater is coalescing downstream and at
It
that
takes
culvert.
time for the worst case scenario to get to these
Okay.
culverts.
I get it. And there's no additional, I heard you say there's no additional area of contribution upstream of that culvert.
Correct.
And please, anybody who's speaking, wants to ask a question to the gentleman, please state your name, where you live, and ask your question.
I spoke to my property on the right. Goes between 6. Now, two things I would like to point out. One is you keep referring to that area as a brook. It was never a brook, it was for water runoff from the mountains in the back. That's where that water comes from. Now you're taking water from the mountains and you're taking water from the development that went in that forced Denardi's yard to get flooded out a little bit. And you're adding that to what comes in the mountains. This was never a flowing brook. It flows when it rains. It flows when we've had a hard winter. Okay, now that's the one thing I want to point out. That shouldn't be labeled a brook, guys. It's supposed to be just a, you know, a pathway for the water to go when it needs to go. Second of all, if somebody here on the commission asked, how come we're losing some of our property? And your answer was because of the way the ground is in the area. Well, wouldn't Denardi's ground be the same ground as ours? And wouldn't she be getting the same impact with the water as we are? Is what I'm saying. So to fix her problem, is it going to create more problems for 6 or 7 or 8 neighbors who've lived there for 30 years? I'm not sure. That's all I want the commission to look at and think about. That's it for me. I'm sorry, but that just need to point that out. I keep hearing the word brook. It goes way, way, way down to a brook, but that is certainly not.
It's typically referred to as an intermittent water course. You get a heavy rain,
Right,
it flows. When it
Right.
doesn't rain, it may dry up in the summertime,
right,
but it's still considered a water course.
but
In
not
the
brook.
states, whatever you want to call it, water traverses.
When you're saying hearing brook, I would all the time. And I just want to let you guys know.
48 Winding Meadow Drive, right after where the pipe finishes. And it gets very wet back there as it is. Water, get a good rain after the winter. You can't even walk back there. I have constantly jacked up my shed because it sinks all the time because of the water. I don't see any of that getting addressed. And that whole situation got worse when the people that moved into that house swaled it so that it went from their built-in swimming pool with their gazebo and all their other fancy stuff matching it, to swale the water down. They took out all of the trees and all the arborvitaes along the side that helped drain that water. And now they want to do more damage to our property with more water coming in from the street. That's ridiculous. I mean, come on, enough is enough. What do? Do I get a sump pump? And every time the water fills up, pump it back into their yard? That's, you know, we don't want to fight like that. It should be a neighborhood. Sorry. It would be a big disservice to all of us. 62 Winding Meadow Drive. Just to one point that they were saying that it's going to take the water from up on top that makes the grass all spongy. Well, granted, if you have the houses up on North and you have that Tom's talking about where the swimming pool was, there's still going to be groundwater on there. It's still going to be wet. It's still going to be mushy. All you're doing is taking a little bit of, well, water that comes from across the street and eliminating that. You're still going to have that swale there, and it's still going to be, it's going to be wet. I don't know. I mean, she just wants to get rid of the sponginess. I don't think this is going to do it. I really don't.
This is passed. What kind of recourse do we have? If something,
You can file an appeal to the decision.
good as
That's,
that.
that's,
She's talking about what happens.
I think what you're seeing, we have a professional engineer who's put an analysis together, stamped his livelihood on the report, stating there will be no increase in the amount of runoff. That's a professional.
the professional guys that were out there doing the survey and all that stuff.
I have nothing more to say.
And guys, and like Jim just said, we have to rely on what professionals tell us. They have their license and their livelihood on the line. If something happens and they're disproven, they could lose their license. So what they're doing is they're doing what they know what to do, and we have to go with their knowledge and their decision, what they're telling us.
Talking about brooks, we're not talking about our backyards. I don't even know if they came into our backyards to look at.
And that is not a part of the proposal that's before us. They are not obligated to go into your properties. For those of you, okay, just to give you a little bit of history, I've lived in this town my entire life for about 65 years. The Winding Meadow Drive was built. It was a swamp. It was filled. It was filled. Okay. The wetland regulations today would not allow something. You're going to experience high groundwater. Okay, it's probably within a couple feet of the surface most of the times of the year. It was a wetland area that was filled. This is not creating an additional problem, nor is it going to help your situation. You have to understand that you're in an area that is wet. There's nothing that we can do about that at this point.
What he's saying is, it's not gonna affect brooks. It's gonna
Correct.
affect yards. There's no study that he did as to what's gonna go into our yards.
He is not required to do that. The question, just hear me out, okay? From the standpoint of what the commission is obligated to look at, okay? There was a concern that there would be additional flooding in the cross culverts a little farther downstream, okay, that go under Winding Meadow Drive. The engineer was instructed to do an additional survey, pick up the data farther downstream, put a drainage analysis together, which we have here, stamped by a professional engineer based upon the standards and the requirements that he's responsible to do, put forth. Okay, so that's, if you have a wet yard, there's nothing we can do about that.
It's got nothing to do with the wet yard. It's a flooded yard.
But we can't, no matter if we put this, if you allow this or not, it's gonna be flooded anyway.
Obvious, guys, made up. They, you know, it's not right what they're doing to the neighbors. This case.
What all I can tell you is, like Jim just said, professional engineer come out and said, it's not gonna change what's already there.
Look, when that was Lower Lane Dairy, I was back there with the fire department, I was on the fire department, getting hooves from their cows stuck in the mud that was down in there. I was in town many years. So, and I know all about the wine area. So what they're doing to us is not very good.
I have a question. The elevation of the backyards of those compared to where you're putting a pipe, can you tell me what that is? So the elevation, yeah, correct, right across the back of those yards.
So the elevation
The out,
of the outlet of the pipe is at 48.5. And as you get up to the property line,
Yeah.
here's 49.5 right here. And as you look even further north, it does get higher. We just didn't record any more elevations because we did it.
All right, how
How
about,
about further east?
how about the last
Yeah.
two houses that you have down at the bottom?
So let's put it this way, the elevation at the bottom, the end of these culverts is right around 46, which is, everything is flowing downhill in an easterly and southerly direction.
How about the top two lots? Yeah, those two. What are their elevations at the back of their?
So
yards?
is this 48, 48, 49? And this is a 48 contour, 48 elevation right at the behind the shed.
So when you put in that pipe, What's the elevation on top of after you bury the pipe? What's that gonna do?
The pipe is gonna be sitting on the ground here.
Right, no, on
That's-
top, you're gonna fill that in, right?
Correct. We're
So
gonna,
what's the top of
the
the,
top of that pipe is gonna be roughly, I have that labeled. 52, 50, 50, right about there.
so the top of the pipe is gonna be higher than the back?
The water's gonna still, remember, the pipe is moved onto the Denardi property, sorry. So there is gonna be water running next to the pipe and down and to the,
So you still gonna have a swale there then?
yes.
And if I can just address a few of the comments. I should have been more precise and called it intermittent water course. I was using the term brook colloquially, but it doesn't change the fact that the calculations that are submitted in the report show that we're not adding or subtracting any water from this area. The ground in the area, Ms. Nardi's lawn might still be wet, and we never said this is going to be a complete comprehensive fix. And we never said that it's going to solve or even, change the conditions for anyone else around here. And I'm not representing that it will. It's just going to have, an effect of reducing the floodedness on that, particularly in that strip of the Denardi property. Tom, you said there'd be more water from the street. The water from the street comes out of this pipe and it ends up in the brook. That's not going to change. There's no more water.
There's water coming out of that pipe. And last time I thought you said you were gonna have like a dry well when it came out. the holding area.
We're having at the end of our pipe, like a stone.
Yeah.
Area, yes.
So what's the absorption rate of that?
The
For all
purpose,
that water going in,
the purpose of that is not necessary to absorb water, but to slow it down to prevent erosion.
so water will sit on top.
We want the water to keep moving in an easterly direction and get to the brook.
But water coming out of that pipe will continue to sit on top of that until it all moves out,
Until it moves.
which means it will spill over into our yards.
Your yards are high, I keep saying your yards are higher than the pipe, higher than the Denardi property.
That's not what you just said, right? Am I understanding that? Because you said that was, top of that pipe was at 50. And what are the
Yeah,
top
water,
line?
her property is lower than theirs.
Okay,
The top of the pipe, water doesn't come shooting out of the top of the pipe. It comes out the bottom. I don't even sound like a belittling you at all, but that's how drainage doesn't work.
It's an 18-inch.
wait a minute, no. Listen, when somebody says the top of the pipe is 50.
Yep.
Right? And the house's property lines are at 48, top of the pipe is at 50 and at 48, that's, the property lines are lower.
But then again, we're in between the property line and the pipe is going to be lower again. It's going to be the pipe, a gradual swale, just like there is a swale here now.
Okay, so there's
On
gonna,
the
there is
Denardi
gonna,
property.
there is gonna be a swale, it's gonna be
Yes.
all the way down?
Yeah. Yes.
And you said that there's gonna be, you're gonna put stone at the end of the pipe, is it gonna go all the way to the brook or just in a?
Just at the end of the pipe, there's really, there's a calculation that we can do to size that. That's what we've done. It only needs to be about 10 feet long.
I believe that's as a velocity dissipator.
It's a velocity dissipator, prevent erosion, that's all.
And you ended the pipe where you did, so you didn't have any effect on the wetland. So that the gravel,
Correct.
the dissipator could be placed in the uplands and not the wetlands.
Correct.
Just to be thorough then, your additional 2 lots shown at the bottom of it.
Mhm.
The box shown there, what is that?
This?
Yeah.
That's somebody's shed.
Oh, okay.
What's the elevation of that, do you know?
I don't know. I can tell you the ground elevation in the vicinity of 47 to 48. I don't know if that shed is sitting up over on the ground or above the ground, but
40, looks like 46. on the plan.
46 is at the bottom of the brook. Sorry, water course. I'm doing it too. Apologies.
Or the shed is in the brook.
Yeah,
Yes.
yes,
Okay. Yeah. never mind.
or in the water source.
The shed is probably within the rear yard setback, which is a zoning violation to begin. with.
Anybody else have anything to ask or say? Commission members, anything?
I feel like this was decided before we even came in here by Mr. Horrible. Oh, I feel so.
Anybody else? If not, can I make a motion to close? This is the last.
Yes, you've got to close a public hearing by, I believe it's April 4th, not April 19th.
And we're not meeting before that, so
Make a motion to close the public hearing.
can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now I need a motion to either approve or deny the application of 22-11 W proposal by Teresa Dinardi. Anybody gonna make a motion?
I make a motion to approve application 22-11W.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Those are
Too bad you guys didn't just do this.
Next up is application 23-01 W. Proposal by 175 West Main Street LLC to construct a 3-lot subdivision within both a wetland and upland review areas on lot 16, block 127, number 235 Wellsfield Road. Have a motion to open the public hearing.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to recuse myself from consideration of this application.
Very good, Bill. Thank you. Can I make a motion to approve?
I make a motion to open public hearing on one W.
Have a second? All in favor? Before the people get the people for the Dinardis, does anybody from this audience who wants to make a comment of something that was said last time that they want to correct, change, add to? Before, and that way the engineers and the South Sciences can answer your questions before they go to presentation. If
Am I all set for what I did? That's.
Yeah, what we're gonna do is we are gonna look into the minutes and see, and then at the next meeting, we'll make a decision. Because we didn't approve the minutes. We table it to next meeting. If nobody has anything to say, then who's up for the applicant?
Good evening. My name is Jack Gilmartin. I'm with JL Surveying, located at 212 Old Brickyard Lane. And I'm basically here to, in my portion, to discuss some of the things that were commented on the drawings itself. One of the comments was I stated that we're doing a slab on grade. I had the old footing grades put in there, so that was removed. It's a slab on grade notice for that. Another comment was that we didn't have a flow line at the end of this 8-inch pipe going across the front drain. There's been flow lines been put into it and added onto the site plan. We have a Fred Clark, a professional engineer, that's going to present the drainage, post-development drainage report. He will talk about that, but one of the things in his report was that he did an analysis of putting in the house and the complete driveways, and we've gone from 6 chambers to 9 chambers on each one of these properties. And the comment was made about having an overflow, so there's a 1.5 inch overflow line coming out the back over here, and another one coming out over here. We added those in there. Trying to think of other comments. The comment was, and just clarifying, was that the applicant had a person testifying that in a conservation easement, you can't have drainage. in it. This, again, the original plan here was a 25-foot storm drain. And then that was converted to a conservation easement, and the conservation easement language is 35-foot conservation easement. The easement owner is prohibited from filling, grading, excavating, or tree removal, except for the necessity to maintain a water course. So it is intended to be a drainage area on this area. It's what it was originally designed. What else is there? There was also a comment about, there's a 6-inch line back here, drainage line back here. We are proposing to put an 8-inch line in. Again, a comment was made that if we're putting in an 8-inch line, are we draining the wetlands by doing that? This line, changing that to an 8-inch line doesn't benefit us at all. This was put in really in concerns with the neighbor of this property here and help them their situation. So we're proposing to put a larger pipe in it. But as a stipulation, the commission has a concern that we're putting an 8-inch line in there, French drain in there instead of having a 6-inch. We would gladly go back to leave the 6-inch as it is and not do any work in that. I think there was much else on it that I've changed. We have, like I say, Annie will do a little presentation to go back to the comments that were made by their expert, and Fred Clark, a professional engineer, will explain the drainage report. That's pretty much my comments on the drafting part of it.
Good evening. I'm going to address the comments in the Pink House letter, or some of them, and this is a written version of what I basically will be saying. So let me I think there are 3 major concerns that we would like to address in the that were mentioned in the letter, and as Jack mentioned, Fred Clark will address the drainage computations. I'm going to spend more time on the soils, and we'll also talk about wetlands. So in the comments, under a executive summary, you basically see that as the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission, as far as changes in peak runoffs and all that. And Mr. Clark will address that anyways. The other one is that the next comment was in the executive summary. I'm just going to spend some more time. The others I'm going to go very quickly. So the other one is the down gradient slopes, people will get more water. And this is the purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission because it's not in the wetland, affects the wetland, but we feel that the volume will be reduced because the runoff from the roofs is going into the ground. We're changing what is surface runoff and then putting it into the ground. It's grass that's carrying it. And the other thing is we're proposing a long curtain or French drain along the front, which picks up a lot of the drainage from the roadway, which is mostly roadway. So we're gonna put that to where the town puts the rest of its roadway drainage. It's on our lot in this conservation easement. So that would tend to dry up our lot, which would tend to dry up anything else. So we feel that those 2 items will actually reduce the water going downhill. Then item C was the stormwater management plan, purview of the Planning and Zoning Commission. And next item is D. we are, I think by the end of this evening, the commission should have enough information to make a what do you call it, informed decision on the impact of this project on the wetland. As far as the wetland is concerned, we are not doing anything in the wetland, how poor a wetland it may be. We're only doing in the 50-foot upland review area. That's all we're touching. That's why we're here. It's only in the upland review area. We're not touching the wetland. And I think your call for the meeting says both, but we're not doing anything in the wetland. In fact, another soil scientist will address the fact that we're trying to improve it by putting bushes to mark it so that the future owner will not trample on it, et cetera, whatever. And then what we would like to say is that the town review process with various commissions may result in changes and modifications to our originally submitted plans. In fact, it already has. Well, we are committed to compliance, to be in compliance with all federal, state, and local regulations, and to work with town staff to address all issues that may have come up or may come up. So things change as it goes through the various conditions. We're going to meet the town's regulations and work with staff to overcome those. So of the 27 items that's mentioned in the letter, and these are specific to site plans, and these are like, you missed the number of elevation, the two chambers don't agree. That's the type of comment. So I'm not going to go into detail. I just wanted to, for example, on 9, we added elevations, put elevations on the French drain. We added the French drain detail over above. The other questions are planning and zoning purview, or their minutia questions. They're involved with questions, but they're it's just details. So that gets me to the soils aspect of the lot, because I'm sure people are interested in that. And so what we did is we looked at historic photographs going back to the 1970s and 60s, of what this area looked like, how it changed, and what it affected, and what maybe hopefully will provide information to the neighbors that might be useful. So this lot was farmland grazing. That's what it was. I understand from the neighbors, they had cows there, whatever. So there was no pristine wetland on that lot or area. Okay, so then everything from this whole subdivision drains into the, I call it the factory wetland lot to the east, but it also goes to the left, and it cuts off anything from all these subdivisions going to the Mattapisic River. So sooner or later, runoff from whatever is here goes through that property. And in fact, in the next, I have attached a photograph from 1970, which shows the property. And yes, there was a pool, concrete pool on the Kulesia property.
I know.
And it's shown on this 1970 photograph. But what happened is that when the big lot, Kulesia lot, was subdivided, that pool ended up on Mr. Korzynski's lot. So the developer who just bought that lot got rid of it. It wasn't Kulesia, or it didn't, or the present owner. It had nothing to do with it. So, and that was done around 1995, 2000, in that area. So on the picture, the first picture that comes up is there's a pool house and a garage shown. And what else is shown is that the lot to the east has a service road right through it. So it's the whole lot, and people, the factory, I guess it's Fosdick now, people from there used it as a shortcut to get out to Weathersfield Road to another factory that they had further down. And the utility company used it. So the lot next door had trucks going through, had ditches. And in fact, this photograph shows a nice ditch pretty much where the ditch is now, carrying water from the road, drainage, and the glacial lot, and even Mr. Electric's lot, out to the northeast. So those are shown. That lot on this picture has no trees on it, etc. So the next photograph that I show is a 2000 picture, and this one shows that homes on Brownstone have been built, and there's no pool on the glacial lot, so it's gone. It was taken. It was put in around 1970s, and it was gone by 1995. And it's currently where Mr. Brzezinski has a shed in back. He has a shed of where the pool was. The next photograph that we looked at is from 2009 aerial, and what this one shows is that some young arborvitae were planted along the border of the Brzezinski lot, which is 16-3, and on the 2000 aerial it doesn't show. So what happened is the previous owner on lot 16-3 planted a row of arborvitae with a berm on a berm. This cut off the sheet flow coming off the palatial lot onto the Brzezinski lot, and once in a while it creates a pool on the palatial lot. So that's where that pool is coming from. Is that when Mr. Brzezinski bought that lot, that's what he bought. He bought a pool created by the previous owner on the other guy's lot, on the palatial lot. And the water went from the palatial lot through Brzezinski to the Rulka lot. There's another row of arborvitae there, and if you there's a oops, I don't think I have a picture in my folder. So what happened is that after a big rainstorm, after the last meeting, a pool gets created. But if you look right on the other side of the property, it's green. There's no pool. So that berm holds the water that used to flow into the Brzezinski lot and further down. So that drainage problem was created by the previous owner because he bought that, and that's.
Show me what pool is right there.
The pool is in here, and this is the arborvitae line here. So there's the grass, and the water basically flowed like this. So this stopped it from going. So it had nothing to do with that, but we bring it up. It doesn't have to do with wetlands on our lot. There's a lot of people that are interested in whatever. So 3 days after that heavy rain, you barely can see the ponding there. And it just so happened we were there 10 days later, and there's no pool. So basically, that soil will take that water even as it stopped. During that same storm, we took a picture of. We went up Weathersfield Road and took a look at water coming down. Here's water running off the upstream lot, which is the Whitney property. You might notice there's a pipe going in there, and it rolls into the storm drainage system, and then it goes on to our client.
On the road taking a picture?
Yes, I'm standing on the road taking the picture. It looks like that fence is maybe the property line, and there's a pipe, a black plastic pipe. So it's channeled, so that water comes down into the storm drainage system of the road.
Can you point where you were standing?
So this picture is taken up here, this way, looking up.
This picture.
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, so you're further down with us a little bit.
Further, yes, I'm further down, and it happens to be. So here's the storm drainage system. The picture is taken standing on the road here, looking up that way, right there. So that water flows into this catch basin down here, down where this field road, and then into this defined drainage ditch in the 1970 photo shooting
So
off.
you're saying that pipe is coming from the Budney property?
Yes, there's a pipe here. I don't know if it picks up. There's a very large parking lot there. It's like the 20 cars, or if there's a low spot, I don't know where it's coming from, but that's where that is from. Okay,
Was that taken on a dry day, a wet day?
it was a wet day. It was right after the storm. So it was
Okay.
on the 14th. So it just stopped raining. There was a 24-hour rainstorm and it dropped 2.3 inches. So it was a decent storm.
Okay.
Okay, so the other thing we did on these, as far as the soils, the U.S. Geological Survey, USGS, maintains a network of groundwater monitoring wells throughout the state. And one of the things they do, they check the levels to see if we're in a dry period or for a wet period. When all this happened, are we in a dry period or does it get worse if we go to wet period? Well, there's a colored graph in your packet, which shows that during the summer, the groundwater in this wells from Marlboro goes down, and then it comes back up in the wet period, which is spring and winter, fall, spring. So what this one shows is that this is Marlboro well 32. Anyways, so the beginning of the year, starting April, May, when my client bought the property, it was a dry year. It was actually much drier than normal. These little triangles, the green is where the normal range of groundwater is. The black dots is the midpoint. So there's the same number up and below readings. And the red line is the line that's taken this past year. So the groundwater was very dry. So my client bought it. It was very dry, and I doubt if there was any kind of puddles then. But then in the December, January, started climbing into the normal range. In January, it hit the highest wet record. So and then same thing happened in March, and that coincides with the two times that puddle appeared in the thing. So looking at this whole situation was at the worst time. It's the worst time on record, so it doesn't get any wetter than we were now. So the other thing is, in looking at groundwater flow, is that groundwater flow flows in a fashion called laminar. And laminar flow is viscous, so it's like honey. So the warmer the water is, the faster it flows. In fact, you could say water in Florida, groundwater in Florida flows twice as fast as groundwater in Alaska. Very few engineers take that into account when they do their calculations. But we did check, and water is a strange and wondrous thing. And the densest it gets is around 41 degrees Fahrenheit. We put in 2 monitoring wells on the property, and they're where the groundwater chambers are supposed to be put in. And the temperature we measured was between 38 and 44. It's like picking up 44. So we looked at these lots when the groundwater was the slowest, it was the wettest, and so we did. To analyze it, we had the right time of year. It wasn't a dry period, et cetera, et cetera. So the 2 monitorings we have, wells that I put in, we're continually monitoring them. And after some of this, so what happens is you can figure out how much a lot can discharge water if soil is like a sponge. Say half of it is soil and the rest of it's air and water. Some of that water will drain out like on a sponge, but some of it just hangs in there. You can't get it out. So this drainable porosity, if you apply it, confirms the information that Fred Clark came up with, that these lots can pass a lot of water, and underground chambers will work, septic systems will work, and drainage stuff will work on these lots. So this is a picture of one of those monitoring wells that we put in. They basically go down to the heart pan, and then we measured the water table fluctuations after that big storm. Because what happens, you can calculate drainable porosity. Precipitation can go into the ground, run off, or plants can evapotranspirate it. So evaporate or transpirate. When it's cold, evapotranspiration is nothing. Groundwater flow is the only way, because after the runoff, there's no runoff after the rain stops. So it's all groundwater. You can use the porosity, come up with a number. So basically, we did soil testing on these lots that confirm what we're saying about drainage, et cetera, that this French drain will work. It will dry out these lots because it intercepts drainage from Weathersfield Road and also groundwater coming up from this property to the south under the road and into the lot. That curtain drain will pick it up, and we discharge it to the same place where the town discharges its other drainage from Weathersfield Road. So I think that's all I had. Just to summarize, if I may quickly, the wetlands that are shown in green on our property were legally filled in prior to the Wetlands Act, 20 years prior to the Wetlands Act, and have been maintained as pasture and mowed lawn since then. So it's not very pristine wetland. For the past 50 years, this lot to the east has been carrying drainage from this lot, from this property, out to the Matabesic River. The drainage issues that these property owners are having are partly their own creation. They put a berm in and trees to protect themselves. They cause puddles, but these puddles aren't indicative of a drainage problem. It's indicated that they're stopping that water from going onto their lot. When they bought it, that's what they bought, water coming onto the lot. But when they put that in there, they stopped it. So we tested the soils at the most adverse conditions of highest groundwater, see the USGS well, and the slowest groundwater flow. And so, as I said before, these activities are not taking place in the wetland, only in the 50-foot upper upland review, and that's why we're here before the commission. And I'll turn it over to Mr. Frederick Clark.
Next report.
Good evening. My name is Fred Clark. I'm a licensed civil engineer, licensed professional engineer, civil engineer by trade. I said, might be able to qualify that I'm practicing the retirement part, so I'm down to about a day, a week or so. So hopefully we'll be putting that part traded up with the grandchildren to go pretty soon. I want to keep this fairly simple because in its concept, it is simple. The basic requirement that we're looking for is that the two houses that are being developed here, houses and drives, are going to create impermeable surface. Combined with the rating, that would change the runoff coming out. Your regulations require that there be no increase in runoff for, say, a 25-year storm to the abutting properties. Jack mentioned briefly that when he was in here before, up with the original application, they had two Caltech units in the middle lot and 6 on each of the side lots. I evaluate all the information, including what Andy was just chatting about, and kept it fairly simple in terms of the fundamentals of drainage design. Incidentally, rain falls. It falls all the time. As drainage engineers, and as you all know, we're not anticipate, we're not guessing about what the numbers are. There are well-established numbers for rainfall events, which are taken into account by the end of the cycle. That takes into account the peak events. There's 5-minute to 60-minute increments. There are 24-hour periods. That's the nature of hydraulic and storm drainage engineering. So we're looking at this and saying, this right now is essentially one lot that's all drained to the north. What we're doing for the drainage is what was originally done in concept, is putting underground storage units on both of the outside lots. This existing lot, there's no change in here, and that does not require any additional supplemental sub-drainage units in here. So we focused on the two sides, and in essence, what we have is a 2,240 square foot house, 1,000 feet of driveway. We've got 3,200 square feet of impermeable surface. We come into the Caltech units, take them, I used 100-year storm. For 8 inches is the maximum amount of rainfall you would get in a 24-hour period for 100 years. That's actually higher than it used to be. The DOT upped those numbers about 5-6 years ago. We used to use 7 inches. Now we have updated data from NOAA and the Department of Transportation. So I use conservatively the 8 inches, brought it into the chambers, sized the chambers up, which is shown on the sheets here. We basically have between the Caltech units and stone that surrounds it, it's 9 units. There are 3 units by 3 units, approximately 4 feet by 7 feet, surrounded by stone. It provides 780 cubic feet of voids. That's about 600 gallons. I'm sorry, 6,000 gallons. Yeah, that's 783 feet. So that rainfall is the amount of rainfall on both the houses and the driveway at 3 inches of rain, which is really, that's about the maximum you'd get in a 100-year period. You would get 3 hours in a 1 hour period. So my point is that this is a very simple concept that says we're essentially tracking everything in these units, combined with another thing that Andy alluded to, the percolation rate, which for this soil, we've used a very low number. I often use 1 inch equals 15, 1 inch per 15 minutes per drop. We use 1 inch per 30 minutes. That's a very slow rate. So we have 783 feet of cubes of storage over a 24-hour period at the bottom of the crust stone layer. That will allow another 1,400 cubic feet. So we're up to, 2180 cubic feet of rainfall that will go in the ground, not up on the surface. So that's not draining down here. That drains these out for all intents and purposes, 0 outflow going out. We have a relief outlet, if you will, as Jack mentioned, 1.5 inch outlet just to provide a relief. It's not going to flow very often, but it does provide some relief for no nuances to the event. So in essence, what we're saying is we have absolutely met the highest standard in here of no increase to flow to the abutting property owners whatsoever. This is actually, there's less surface rainfall runoff going to the abutting properties than there is right now after these houses are built the way they are and with this storm drainage system. With that, I will listen to any questions. I'll turn it over to George.
And this is George. Good evening, George Logan for the record. Rema Ecological Services, registered soil scientist, professional wetland scientist, certified senior ecologist, wildlife biologist. Actually, I'm going to give you a few more. So I had the benefit the last time that we were here before this commission to hear the entire presentation from both sides. And I wasn't sure I was going to be doing this. I'm here with another client. So what I wanted to do is just focus on what, give you a little bit of information on this particular wetland and what my opinion is as far as what the potential impacts could be. Attached to this report, I have a few pictures that show that I was out there on March 28th. So I have pictures of the actual wetland. I have pictures of the little berm that's right here with the arborvitae. You can see the little drains that show that there's a drainage there that picks up water from the wetland as it flows through shallow groundwater flow. And then I show you a couple of pictures of the more extensive and somewhat more undisturbed wetland system that's in the east and then carries down the hill. I also show you I guess the ditched intermittent water course that's off in this location, and then there's a side ditch that's just off the edge of the property. You can see that. And then I also show you a picture that I took in this northwestern corner, which has been some discussion. And of course, I had to show you the picture of the bedrock, which has been talked about in this general location here. So when I was out there, my feet were wet here, but they were not wet in this corner. They were wet here. And so what I did is I did a couple of cores, not so much to verify the wetland delineation, but just kind of get an idea of what it looks like. And what I discovered is between 9 and 11 inches, sort of a fine sandy fill over the pre-existing wetland. So there was a pre-existing wetland here. If you go down, again, it's almost a little further than the bucket of my hugger. You'll see that you have the old silt loam topsoil there. So that was a wetland. And also what has happened is that there's more fill that extends a little further up. So probably at one point the wetland went further up. But because the fill is deeper here to the pre-existing wetland, it doesn't qualify as a wetland. Whereas here it's shallow, so it does qualify as a wetland. As you've heard before, there's sort of two components to this wetland. You have, most of it is this mowed lawn that was once a pasture. And I verified that. I looked at the same aerial photographs that Andy looked at. And so I also have, thankfully I have a different one. So I have the 1986 aerial photograph that shows the in-ground pool, which is mostly on the adjacent property, maybe a little sliver on this property, the way that I kind of figured it out. If you line things up, but mostly on the other property. I also give you an aerial photograph that's a recent one, so you kind of take a look at what the property looks like now, more or less. That's a 2016, and I also put the 2016 topography, the GIS, Connecticut GIS, so you can kind of see on an aerial photograph what the contours look like, to see that you have the ridge in the middle. So you have one little catchment area this way, and you have another catchment area that's going in the other direction, and then the ridge in the middle. The other thing that I said here in my report is that obviously from a function and values, always we want to know, what is this wetland doing? Honestly, well, the wetland that's offsite and downgraded, even though it's been disturbed and it was pasture at one point, there's invasive species here and there. It's not too bad. And as you regress onto the property, there's more invasives and more disturbance. There's actually a wire fence that probably told you that was the limit where the cows wouldn't go any further. That's just off the property boundary a little bit. I also saw that the drainage from this drainage system here by the berm is a little shallow swale, and you can see you saw the photograph there, and it discharges in this particular location, just at the edge of the woods, if you will. So from a wetland functions and values, there's no principal functions that the on-site wetlands provide. Of course, we have a larger wetland there, so if I did the whole ecological unit, obviously it would be more functions, but I focus mostly on what do the wetlands on site provide for the entire unit. So there are no principal functions, but there are secondary functions. So what are the secondary functions? Obviously, there's one, groundwater recharge and discharge. This is a groundwater fed wetland that's seasonally saturated, as you notice from, you can see one of the pictures of my tracks going across. And then, of course, we have nutrient removal and transformation, and we do have a little bit of wildlife habitat, but all these are limited. That's mostly because of the wooded portion that Mr. Jackson flagged. So the next thing I always look at is, what are the physical impacts? What are we doing here? As been said, there's no alteration within the wetland itself, so we don't have a direct physical impact of altering, direct filling, or excavating the wetland itself. It's been maintained lawn, or it's conservation easement, or that easement there. And there's going to be some enhancement that I'm going to talk about. And the enhancement has to do with what are we going to do within this area. I have a little different plan that I'll explain. So by the fact that we're going to be doing something here, which I'll explain, we're increasing the functions and values, but particularly the values. It is the human use values. So sometimes people say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means that if you have someone living here and you create a nice habitat, the recreational aspect passive goes up, the educational aspect goes up, and also the aesthetic, visual aesthetic value comes. These are values, these are things that we confer as humanity. A lot of people ignore that, but I don't, because those are the functions and values that we look at. So, let me talk a little bit before I conclude about the enhancement plan. So I look at this as an opportunity to do something good. As you probably know from the likes of me, one thing is that wet meadows or open wet meadow wetlands are becoming increasingly uncommon, because in most cases, and there are exceptions, especially in a landscape that has been developed, if you don't do anything, they just go back to shrub. Usually they're filled with invasives, and then eventually they become a forest, which is kind of what happened here. So the only way to benefit from a wet meadow in this kind of landscape is to maintain it, which is, that's an issue usually. So what I've recommended, and here's sort of the 5 things that I'm asking for to be considered, is first, let's define the southern limit of the on-site wet meadow wetland and put a split rail fence somewhere in here. So we know, okay, this is the wet meadow there, and don't have to put it all around, maybe just designate it somewhere across here so that everyone knows that that's the wetland that's going to be enhanced. Then the next thing you would do, I know it sounds like a disturbance, but it isn't, is to rototill the wet meadow portion. I know you kind of have to be careful with that little drainage area, down to up to 12 inches. That's basically the fill. Third thing is to amend the soil with 1 or 2 inches of a top dressing, which is usually what we like to see is a high quality leaf compost, 2-year minimum. And then we have seeding and planting. And after the first growing season, then from then on, the recommendation would be to cut down the vegetation no closer than 4 inches to the ground. And you can do it once a year, either late June or early November, or you can kind of switch from year to year. I can tell you why that's the case, what that would do, but it's basically the practice. So in the back, what I've done is I've provided some tables that you can see. Table 1 is trees. And you say, well, I thought you were going to do a wet meadow. Well, it's always good to put maybe a tree in the corner. And that would be, the tree would be a black gum, which likes this kind of habitat. It's also very aesthetic in the fall, it turns crimson. Then a small tree and shrub, only one of those. So we have a shadow, we can put it somewhere. Again, flowering right about now until for the next couple of weeks. And then as far as shrubs, I only put 9 because I want this to be a meadow. So the shrubs will be more to add a little bit of diversity, maybe define some of the edges. And you can see that 7 of the 9 are meadowsweet, which don't grow higher than yay. And they're profusely flower, and all these things are for pollinator interest, which is one of the other things that we like from wet meadows. And then for herbaceous plants, I've got 200 of them. Oh, that's a lot. Well, they're 2-inch plugs. And they come in 50 per tray, so you can't get less, you can get more. And if you look at what I've provided, these are all pollinator species. You have swamp milkweed, purple Jew pieweed, blue vervain, and New York ironweed. You've seen New York ironweed, it has that deep purple flower that usually can go up to here. And if you cut them in June, everything else would look dry, but those will be green. And that's the reason for doing it late June. And then finally, because we're scarifying the area, rototilling to prepare it, I have a seed mix, which is sort of a wide spectrum. It's called the New England Conservation and Wildlife Mix. And you have to buy 2 pounds minimum, so that's what it is. And because the area is flat, I don't think it's going to be an issue as far as erosions and rotation, but obviously there should be a silt fence on the upper side so you don't have water washing through and out. This is a small enough area so that it can generate anything, especially if you get quick germination. And if depending on the time of the year, I usually recommend throw in a little bit of ryegrass for quick greening up, and then about 25 to 30% of the seed mix will grow this year, and the rest of it will grow the next year. So in conclusion, basically, my professional opinion is that this is not a significant activity as far as the wetland is concerned. It will not result in an adverse impact, either short-term or long-term, as long as the sedimentation erosion controls are in place and maintained. Not only for the wetlands in site, but also obviously for wetlands offsite that are down gradient. And that there will not be a diminution of wetland functions and values. As a matter of fact, I think there's going to be an uptick in wetland functions and values because of the little bit of enhancement that we're doing. And that's all I have to provide for you tonight. If you have any questions,
Will you
I'm gonna
comment
be here.
specifically on that drain that's across the back of that wetland and
Sure.
the increase to an 8-inch pipe, I think is what was
Yeah,
proposed?
so that's a great question. I was thinking about it. So the benefit is, if that drain was on the upside, oops, we'd have a problem. But it's on the downside. And in these kinds of soils, even a drain like that is not going to wicking too much water up. It's just going to be receiving the overflow from the wetland itself as the groundwater is passing through and then wicking it off to the other side. So this is not going to do, whether it's a 6-inch or an 8-inch, as long as your invert is more or less the same. It's just a matter of volume. With an 8-inch, you get more than a 6-inch, obviously. But because it's in the down gradient position, it's not going to affect the hydrology.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Now, George, did you discuss this with the owners, and is this something that they're?
No, they're gonna beat me up in the parking
That's
lot.
what I was gonna say.
Yeah, I was told this afternoon that George is coming in with a different planting, so we will modify as a condition of approval. I use just what I've used out in town here for other plants before. And obviously, he's a lot more knowledgeable.
I can't help him.
Got a better scheme.
So all this improvement is acceptable.
Okay.
to the owner, yeah.
Mike, anybody else have any questions for the engineers? Anybody from the audience? Again, state your name and your address.
Yeah, David Lucer, 406 Brownstone Road. Any question, who's going to maintain all this proposed planting and vegetation? How do you force an owner to do that? How does anybody answer that question for me?
Well, obviously, what will happen is, there's a couple things. On a subdivision plan and on the site plan, there's some notes put on here about typically that the homeowner or the developer can't. One of the comments came out of the comments of the last meeting was, what's your construction sequence? And the construction sequence is basically, the most important part is, we put a note on here that the developer will meet with town staff to walk through the conservation easement, determine what needs to be cleaned out, what needs to be mitigated in here to get this to flow better. Basically, this is my level. And then if and when he's completed, it will be re-inspected by the town for approval before any building permits were submitted. That type of note would also go, what George is talking about, and what his requirements will do is we will put that note again on the revised subdivision as a condition, put his notes on there, what has to be done. And this property owner, it will be in his deed and it will be on his property, that it would be their obligation to maintain that.
If I may add something to that, that's a great question.
Yeah.
No sight, no see, then.
I live right behind it. I'm very concerned.
Right.
I'm gonna force them to maintain it. Who's gonna
Maybe
do
you
it?
have more butterflies there. So the thing that I would recommend is a minimum of 3-year monitoring. So say year 1 is the year of implementation, that usually happens in the spring. You can plant the plugs up to, say, first week of July, after that not, unless you want to water. So if you have 3 years, by the time the last year is there, there's going to be an owner who's been used to seeing this. And hopefully this thing looks so good that they want to maintain it. And then, year 2, year 1, we'll have a little memo to the commission. Year 2, a little memo to the commission. Year 3, a little memo to the commission.
No, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 10, year 15, year 20.
For something like this, no, I think 3 years is enough. I was creating a large wetland creation, restoration, enhancement, which I do. It can go from 5 to 10 years.
So after that, it'll just grow in and it'll be just like the 35-foot conservation area is now.
Well,
And there shouldn't be anything dumped in that conservation area.
Well,
Right, is that-
worst case scenario, this will be still a wetland, but it will be non-maintained wetland, like the rest of them that exist off-site. But this is an opportunity. If the landowner gets it, this is a benefit. And he knows that there's a little wetland here that's defined that he can't touch. Then we give him the opportunity to create something nice. And if he leaves it alone, all the stuff that's there is going to grow wild. It's going to be better than mowing lawn.
We've had other applications through planning and zoning where a timetable has been put in as a requirement, and that's pretty acceptable.
We've also had the situation where right up front, we would bond prior to the issuance of a building permit for this parcel. We would require the subdivider and or the homeowner applying for the building permit to bond for the improvements. Included within that, we'd set a value to ensure that a report is submitted to the commission on a yearly basis. So typically, that's what gets people to come around. They put the money up and they won't get it back until they abide by it.
And I guess one of your comments years ago, I think more in this town, they were doing rain gardens. I don't know if you're familiar with those. And they found they were an enhanced pool thing, a dip, and that they were not being maintained. So the town has said, we're not going to do that.
That's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, I understand the concerns, but like you say, we put a stipulation and it gets grown, it gets maintained. And I don't know if George, were you saying have markers?
Well, all I was saying is to be able to define it so you don't go from grass to something that's larger and people keep moving the mower further. Is to have a split rail fence placed somewhere along there, 2 sections with a space in the middle so people can go.
Okay, all right. Again, that could be a stipulation. I know that if it was a brand new conservation easement, we'd have to put markers on. That's not the case.
Okay, I'm very concerned with dumping into the conservation area. So here's a picture of the present house that's there. Okay, it has no shrubs in front of it. Okay, all those shrubs were cut down. Picture 2 is the conservation area with all the shrubs that were cut dumped into it. Just like everybody see that. Third picture. So the present owners cut the shrubs, they dumped them into the conservation area. I don't know if that's going to improve our problem. It's up to you guys.
Well, I think what George said is that before all it's done, there's gonna be a walkthrough to make sure that that isn't.
But this happened in the last month or two. They cut the shrubs in front of the house. The shrubs were there for 50 years. The new owners cut the shrubs. Instead of taking them to the dump and getting rid of them, they dumped them in the conservation area. That's what the picture shows. I just
And
wanted,
you know what, my name's Donna Lucic, or his wife. What they did was they're not even within their 13 feet. So they made sure they weren't on their property. They pushed them into
in the conservation area,
conservation area.
25-foot conservation.
So, you know, the thing is, you know, listen, I respect everybody's position, their jobs, what they do, but they don't see the water and they don't know where it's coming from. So you're gonna push all this water in front of these 3 properties into the conservation area, which is all clogged, and nobody is gonna clean because you're only concerned about the 13 inches, 35.
35.
And what happens is this water that's getting pushed here, still, it does not go north. It goes to our backyard, which means you're going to be pushing more water with these drains that are going to go that way, that are going to end up in my backyard.
And this is the reason that the water is coming into our yard, because they're dumping stuff in that conservation area. Right here, they just did it in the last month or two. I saw them cut the shrubs down. I saw them drag them across and put them in there. And how are we going to keep this thing clean when they're violating it right away? Their evidence is right here. That's all I'm doing.
I don't have an answer for you. You know, I can tell you that by the definition of the conservation easement, you call the town could send out staff and fine them or tell them to take it out. They got it, that's an illegal act. I mean, totally illegal
Yes.
act, but
And we're
And
talking
nobody's gonna
about
clean.
this.
Who's gonna clean that? Is the town gonna clean that?
no, the homeowner's gonna.
They're not gonna clean past whatever it is that they're required. Meanwhile, that's all clogged already.
It's clogged, it's causing
And you're
problems.
pushing more water in there that's gonna come out the back. Don't shake your head. We live there. Water comes on our property no matter how.
Here's the water from the drainage easement going into the wetlands. It doesn't go into the lot. It goes,
Oh my gosh. You have to check.
What is this?
In this picture.
No, you very
it
rarely.
goes
have
into the
read that.
wetlands. It goes into that defined channel.
You're showing. I presented at the first meeting. What is this picture
It's
showing?
our backyard.
That's the inlands lot. That's the wetlands lot, right there.
Is
After a rainstorm.
so those are your shrubs?
Number 1 here, 30 of them going that way.
And the
This is
shrubs
35.
are on a berm that holds the water back?
Not really,
No?
because the water's
A
coming.
little higher.
To Hortle, if you look over here, you see it over here. The shrubs are here. Okay? The town put a concrete pipe in
Probably
here.
should be coming this way with you block.
No, the town dug this out. You want to come out? Did you come out and look at it? There's a sewer pipe in there the town put in. I didn't put that in.
Was that you put in for the trail that Andy was talking about before? You know,
We don't know of any trail back.
Where?
Well, it's in the photos. When Andy was talking earlier about a trail by the property owner.
Where?
There's a trail. coming
Where?
across.
There's a utility road under the power lines that was also used. And then off your property into that neighboring property, there's a 15-inch RCP. Somebody used to drive over into the wetlands lot. So there's a lot of pipes and buildings in that wetland
And
area.
utility wires that go like. Yes, it is, Andy. Just like.
But if that pipe is an obstruction, they should come out as part of the town's.
Town's put it in on the original easement that they had. And there's a piece of pipe that's been sitting there for 20 years that the town left there.
Well, again, we're looking at cleaning it out and making it function.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I can just make a comment again, as Mr. Logan mentioned with his report, the charge of this commission is to look to protect the wetlands. A number of the issues that have been brought up over the past couple of months are not really the purview of this commission to resolve from the standpoint that those types of issues are addressed through the planning and zoning process. And I'm sure Mr. Logan will concur with that comment. Your charge is to protect the wetland. What we have in front of us is an enhancement of a marginal wetland per se that's in place. And that's what your focus is.
Right, I absolutely agree. Does anybody else have anything else to say?
Based on all this.
Cool.
My board.
Unfortunately, we only have till, I think it's the 14th, Jim, of this
It's the
month.
middle, I believe it's the mid, well,
Till-
it's the middle of the month. To close the public hearing, the applicant would have to consent to an extension of the hearing. Again, a number of those comments, as was mentioned by Mr. Gilmartin and his associate, are planning and zoning issues pertaining to drainage and runoff. They aren't germane to the actual charge of this commission in terms of the activity in and around the wetland itself and the potential for disturbing the wetland that's there with this development. The planning and zoning issues those issues are addressed through the planning and zoning
Right.
process.
So we're gonna close the public hearing and vote on it. And like I said, like Mr. Horrible said, any of those other issues, you go before the planning and zoning. We're here to protect the wetlands, to make sure they're not being filled in or, whatever. And with the information we have, we're gonna vote on it. Anybody else?
Yeah, I have a question. So how are you protecting the wetlands if you're allowing all that water to be poured into it and change whatever the status, if you will, of those wetlands? All that water, so it's probably gonna get more than it did before because you're going across the whole property now. Those 3 lots into the wetlands. So how are you protecting the wetlands?
That's what the wetlands are there for, to,
No, not for excess. No, that's not true. They're there for what happens right now, not for pouring more into it than what was there.
the groundwater is always gonna be there. We're just,
I understand that part.
it's, we're not adding any more. We're not like putting a hose and adding more water.
You're draining all across the front. Those 3
Where'd that
properties
water go before?
in there.
It went,
It didn't go that way.
So if I may, Mr. Chairman. So from a point of wetlands, hydrology is important. And what we usually look at in most cases is not to dewater wetlands, not to have a situation. That's why the question that Mr. White asked was important, to make sure that we're not dewatering that particular wetland. There's plenty of groundwater that will continue to go there. The effect of possibly getting a little additional water into the wetlands is more of a hydraulic, not a hydrologic question. And if you want to believe a professional engineer that talked a little while ago, which basically said there's not going to be an increase in rate of runoff. If there was an increase in rate of runoff, water running off this property at a higher rate could potentially cause issues to the wetland by enlarging the bank, by eroding the bank. But I have to defer to the professional engineer. And what I'm hearing is that that's not going to be the case. So I'm satisfied as a wetland scientist that we're not going to have a hydrologic impact on wetlands, whether they're on site or off site.
anybody else have?
Chris Gordinski, 98 Brownstone Road. If I had a hidden pool in my backyard, can I dig it up and go swimming in it then?
It's on your property.
As long as it meets the zoning
Already in my
requirements,
house.
as long as it falls within the zoning setbacks, you can do that.
I don't want to get taxed on it either.
Well,
Then I'd leave it the way
yeah,
it is.
yeah. Anybody else have any questions or comments for either commission or the people who are up here?
Stuff on the conservation. Yeah, something was put in there.
One more thing, I know, I understand the purpose is clarified for the commission, but it's not to preserve it, it's to review the impact on wetlands. And I think this development is going to have a significant impact on the wetlands, and the fact that it's going to also affect neighbors is the reason that you're all here. And we do care about the property, that we are surrounded by.
Understood, but you just said Mr. Logan say, and he reiterated what the soil scientist said, there's not going to be a great impact, any greater impact, a negative impact to what they're doing.
That's his opinion. And as we said, our expert pointed out 28 discrepancies in the previous engineer's opinion that were proven to be in error.
I think a lot of those were addressed. And again, we're basing what we're going to do on their expertise.
You're saying they were addressed, but our expert hasn't evaluated whether they were adequately addressed.
Is he here to talk about it?
No, sir, because he had another engagement, but he said that we would request he would like to review the material. On receipt, it was not presented. He contacted this department today, and there was nothing submitted prior to this meeting that he could evaluate.
Again, the public hearing has to be closed today by our. And we're gonna vote on this on the experts and what they tell us.
So that we can feel decision based on the fact that it
Certainly.
wasn't.
Yes.
submitted.
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Mr. Chairman, if I may also say something last. So I've been doing this for 35 years. So I've learned a few things. I'm not a legal expert. And I'm neither an engineer, so I have to defer to the engineers. Mr. Trinkhouse would not want me to opine on his territory, an engineer. Certainly, I don't want Mr. Trinkhouse to be opining on my territory as a wetlands expert. He's not a wetlands expert. So I think the only thing that Mr. Trinkhouse could opine on is on what you hear as far as engineering is concerned.
If there's no other comments or questions for the commissioner or the people who are representing the owner, I'd like to have a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. I'd like to have a motion to either accept or deny the application for, let me get the number on there. What was it? I had it right in front of me. Oh, 2301. Yeah, 2301 W. Can I have a motion to accept or deny?
Motion to accept, but we will put some stipulations.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, as far as conditions of the approval, I would request that the commission include the recommendations from REMA Associates in terms of the wetland enhancements, the protection of the wetland. We spoke about a number of things, a split rail fence, monitoring periods, 3-year monitoring period. We would bond for that through the planning and zoning subdivision bonds if it gets to that point in time. I also was mentioning, it is on the plan, I believe, that lot number 3, Jack, correct me if I'm wrong, lot number 3 is the most easterly lot of the proposal, that the footprint of that home is site specific. And when we say site specific, the home has to fit within the footprint. You can go no farther to the north than the backside of the home as it's shown there, in an effort to stay as far as we can in meeting zoning, but also in protecting a setback area to the wetlands. Let's see, footprint. I know there was a question raised in regards to the placement of sedimentation and erosion control on the parcel when development starts, and I would request the commission to condition a statement to the fact that, or stating to the point that staff would work with the applicant to approve the location of sedimentation and erosion control on the site prior to the disturbance of the site, so that we can ensure that it's protected properly.
Also, the clearing or the cleaning of the,
Yes, and that's already noted on
is
the
that
plan
noted on there,
itself.
Jack? The cleaning the easement?
The conservation.
Conservation
Yeah,
easement?
Conservation easement, the note to the maintenance and all
Yeah.
that, to walk through, that's on plan.
Okay,
That's
That
on
whole subdivision inside.
okay.
Jack, do you know where those shrubs were placed, the ones that they said they took out?
Well, we can't, we
Okay.
have a motion.
Okay,
on
sorry.
it.
I think that covers
Okay.
the bulk of it.
All right. That, can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor with conditions? Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
What are you looking for?
One of those. You guys gonna need this?
Yeah, we need that. What I would suggest, come in tomorrow and we can make copies for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I want to put in first. Good noise. If you're not involved in the next meeting, can you go out to the hall, please? Thank you. We have our next public hearing is,
Hold on, Peter.
oh, okay. Oh, that's right. Here it goes. Mr. Jackson is now back on board. It's the public hearing for application 23-03W, proposal by Pistol Brook Holdings LLC to fill a regulated area on Lot 9, Block 72 on 1709 Kenston Road. Have a motion to open a public hearing. Have a second. Second. All in favor? Up for the
Hi, my name is Eric Weber. Here with my partner Mark, we're LLC at Pistol Brook Holdings. The property we're talking about is the former Sunny Bordered Nursery property. And what we're asking is they had an irrigation pond, which is surrounded by completely all processed stone, and it's completely impervious, and the water would just run back in and they'd spray their plants and it would run back in. And in order to develop the property, we're going to be going in front of zoning for a 4-lot subdivision. We would like to fill that in. It was a non-permitted pond when they dug it because of the size of it, but we need a permit to fill it in. And that's what we're here requiring. We consulted with Mr. Logan, Rima Associates, to verify that it was a man-made pond. It wasn't natural wetlands. I believe it was created sometime in the early 80s. And I have some pictures of it. I know we also gave you guys all a packet of it. And I mean, it's a pretty simple request. I don't know if you guys have a bunch of questions, but hopefully we can answer them.
It's not very deep, is it?
George Logan for the record. I'm not exactly sure. I would say that it's, but the fact that where the cattails are coming, it's probably 3 or 4 feet deep.
Yeah.
And again, for the record, so I have a little report that tells you that I was out there at the site sometime in September 2022 to look at it, with some pictures in the back that kind of show what it looks like. It's basically a little puddle in the middle, a bunch of cattails around it, and then a fence. And the pictures also show that some of the remnant pipes that are there. What I found interesting is that I looked at some aerial photographs and you could see, I think I have one in the record. You could see that the water was piped out and then it kind of drained back in. And so you can see the wetness. So I have that photograph that's there. And then I point, you can see the drainage going back in. You can see this whole bed, how it's nice and wet. And you can also see this drainage coming back in. So whatever fertilizer was in those pots that leached out, got way back into the pond. And so I'm sure by a little later than when I was there, late summer, early fall, that probably turned nice and green, especially when the operation was active, which I obviously wouldn't have the benefit of looking at it. And I also showed a picture of early spring, 2016. I think those are either March or April. I want to say it's April 4, usually the 2016 aerial photograph, before they start doing their operation. And you can see the pond is nice and like a nice coffee. So you're not really losing much as far as function. There's no juxtaposition with any other wetlands anywhere across the street and down into the ravine. So probably what happened way back, and I did show you the aerial photograph there, that's 1970, there was no pond. So they probably found the lowest spot. It's not a wetland, but they knew that if they dug 3 feet, they hit the water, and they said, oh, great place. And so that's what happened.
Is there a spring running there, or is it just rainwater collection?
Just groundwater.
Oh, I know, oh, I know.
Yeah. So that's basically it.
Do you have an estimate on the volume of fill?
I can give you just an experienced guess. I think we're going to probably need 600 yards perhaps, because they graded the property in such a way that they could capture all the water. So the amount of material to fill the low spot would depend on the cuts also, which I think was going to be addressed on the grading plans of their proposed homes. But if you were making a giant garden and you wanted a sump to hold the water, you kind of push everything up and out, and then you dig a hole at the low spot, which is what happened. And my best guess is going to be 700-800 yards to fill it in and level it off, because you don't want to make a muddy mess. We want something that's going to drain naturally like it did before they dug the pond. And all the property pitches back to this low area back here, which is like a natural retention basin. And I suspect that at some point, that was where their potting operation was. There's a pile of, it's mix of topsoil and like rotted leaves that's in the corner here. But I think they dug this all out at one time. And I don't know, it happened over so many years that who really knows what they did. But this is a very gravelly area and everything drains in there now. And there's no evidence of runoff from there. So I think we're getting very good percolation in this area. It is a gravelly area.
I just did a calculation, and you're absolutely right. I came up with 711 cubic yards.
Well, I learned something in 40 years. Mark that down, Mark, please.
Just telling.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Anybody from? Go ahead.
Full by Mark Levy.
Please, your name.
Your address.
1774 Kensington. Directly across the street. Mark Laviano, when he was alive, very good friends with him. He told me that pond is 12 feet deep and they dug it with a Caterpillar backhoe.
It could have been deeper. I did a test with my excavator, just to put it in, just because George asked me how deep it was. I think there's a lot of sediment in the bottom of it. And just because of the nature of the way they shaped everything, there's no erosion control on the property. And it is a sandy gravelly material, which they added processed stone to so that their trucks wouldn't get stuck as they're driving up and down the aisles. And I bet there's a lot of fines in the bottom of that pond.
I welcome their development, don't get me wrong. I went to planning and zoning, and I know when they complained because of the way it looked. You had trucks 10 years old with the hood open. You had greenhouses with the keeping you awake at night with the wind. And Pierre wouldn't do anything.
Right.
So I welcome these people to come in and clean it up and put their homes in. They did a beautiful job over at Vista Creek Golf Course. I welcome her. We welcome that.
Not for nothing, my son worked there one summer. And I asked him about it, he doesn't even remember the pond. He worked there from June to end of August, and he goes, what pond are you talking about that? That was like 15, 18 years ago. He doesn't remember it. So, if anybody else have anything? Jim, this is pretty cut and dry, I think. Yeah.
No comment.
Yeah. Guys, any questions or comments? If not, I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing on application 23-03W.
I make a motion.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Now I have like make a motion, need a motion to either accept or deny application 23-03W.
Make a motion to approve application 2303W.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good luck, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Spraying my child.
Oh, it's gonna be interesting. Yeah, boy, that was fine. Actually, that was suggested, but we couldn't change it. Oh, boy, a regular meeting. We have a regular meeting, application 23-04FW. Guys, out in the hall, please.
Good night, gentlemen. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good seeing everybody.
Proposal by PDS Engineering to construct, Engineering and Construction Incorporated Collier to construct a building, addition, and related parking improvements within an upland review area and a flood hazard zone on Lot 3A, Block 81, 400 Christian Lane.
For the record, Barkovay from Beach Son, representing PDF engineering. This is the Delmar Products property on Christian Lane. Yes, to the north of the Willbrook Road. Willbrook Drive. Before the intersection, then we were up here. What you can see is the existing survey. Willbrook is located to the north of the site. The existing building is located kind of here in the southeast corner. And we both have wetlands and floodplain. Even though the wetlands is not shown, the wetlands for all intents and purposes along the edge of the brook. The brook was relocated 30, 40, 50 years ago, and there's basically just riprap and stuff at the edge. So there's really no soils outside the edge. There is a 50-foot review line that's located just off this area here. Now, I apologize, it's not shown. But substantially, we're more involved with the inland wetlands, both the floodway, shown in this way, and a flood storage fringe area located in this area, elevation 45. Then you can see most of the site is encumbered by that flood storage area and floodway out in this location.
So even though we are indicating the brook at the edge of the wetlands, we'll put at the revised plans, the upland, the pheasant foot upland condition that basically runs, coincides with the floodway line from here. And go through here. There is a 40-foot stormway easement that runs along the brook that we have noted. And our proposal is quite simply to add a 7,250 square foot addition to the east side of the building. Here you see the existing building here, about 25,000 square feet. They've got existing parking and loading in this area. And what we're proposing is a small addition on the north side. Water and sewer be brought in. We are proposing a new loading dock in this location. At the present time, they're losing this area as loading dock and going over the stone area. This is all paved. So really what we focused on in our drainage report, and I apologize to Jim because we submitted this thing at the deadline. And he was on vacation and I was on vacation, and we got to talk about this yesterday for the first time. So we haven't really had time to discuss. Did we submit a drainage report with this? I believe so. We Believe did. it's in the If file. we have an hour, we'll get
Yep.
you the drainage report.
So all that's parking lot is existing.
All this parking lot on this side is just the building. We're focusing really on this area.
So
The
that,
north
those
is just
parking
the-
areas are new,
These parking areas out in this area are all new,
along with the building.
along with the addition and the loading ramp. What we're proposing is a series of parking spaces this year. We are bumping this area out slightly above into the floodway. Basically because this is the truck turning area and we're leaving enough room for the trucks to pull in and then back out and pull back in. But there's gonna be no parking within the floodway. Our work within this area involves a filling of about 9,000 square feet of flood storage or flood storage. And we're proposing to mitigate that with the stormwater mitigation area just off the parking area. That will both deal with runoff off the parking lot and also deal with the compensatory storage. In this location, we have a proposing small runoff. These are all previously filled soils or dense. I always get that word messed up. It's got a fairly high permeability rate. Even though that storage area is about 20,000 square feet in size, we're proposing we're using about 1,000 cubic feet for our flood storage. So we don't anticipate any water from this portion of the parking lot entering that detention area that should leave the site. We are proposing a bio swale filter strip along the edge of the parking lot to help mitigate the impacts. You can see here that this area here had a 4-foot wide area to the north. We're kind of replicating that on the back end. Again, we are doing no work. Basically, we're keeping it substantially the same grade. I think we're changing grade by half a foot or 6/10 of a foot within the flood fringe. We are not doing any regrading, substantial regrading within the floodway, except for the creation of this detention area. And in looking at the plans, talking to Jim, there were a few outbuildings out in this location. I'll let Jim talk about that, but we are proposing to relocate one of those outbuildings that are located here and move it back out of the floodway at least. But our goal would be to take these flood areas on a revised plan and move these back. These are not real buildings. These are concrete blocks with hoop houses on them and
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question. I'm looking here. Geez, you got 3 or 4 buildings back there. And
right. They're kind of hoop houses, but we would remove those and pull those out. I think a landscaper was operating back here. And we'll at least move those back up there. And the fact that the landscaper is working back there, that's a planning and zoning issue that they can deal with. But from the standpoint of having those structures, at least within the floodway, we will get those out of floodway. I did look at some historic photographs back on that site. And I went back, at least 1950, there's some decent photographs. There was always activity back in this location. I went back further, close to 1938, and the photographs really didn't do it justice to print about it, what I tried to go up. But there was always some activity here, and these buildings were back in here at least till 1990, 1995. So they've been there for 30 years. But as part of this plan, we're willing to find a place to relocate them out.
I know we got wetlands on this plan, so we can't make a decision.
Right.
Anyway, so we'll make sure the vice Jim's hands in your hands.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, as Bart had mentioned, I guess my biggest concern is that we've got a number of structures that, yes, they're older. They're non-permitted as far as I know.
Sure,
And
like the
they're in
building
the
coverage.
floodway. I think, it's our duty to try to resolve those issues, get them either flood-proofed or removed from the floodway itself.
They're not being used, are they?
I don't know. Well, I saw some pictures in there and they had like a carnival trailer parked in one. So I don't know if the landscaper's in there, but somebody may be renting space to park vehicles.
But the people who own the property they're not using it for anything.
No, I made them aware after I talked to Jim. I talked to the guy at PDS to inform the client that there would be some comments in that. He's got no problem.
Okay.
And we can certainly work to
Yeah.
address those. If we can do it within the next 30 days,
Right.
we will. If we have to go a little longer, but
I'm not.
I think
But no need for public hearing in this, is there?
I don't see a need for it.
Does this, I hate to ask this, but does this fall into the portion of our regulations where they talk about any activity in a floodway, you have to prove that it doesn't increase flood elevations by 0.01 inch or foot or whatever it is?
And that's pretty much our, the concern in dealing with those, first of all, those structures that are in the floodway.
Right,
The activity that's being proposed is essentially at existing grade. So
We are removing the viable material, so there's that change of flood storage loss. And flood storage compensation is in the floodway. So you're gonna have that improvement during the fourth storm.
But as far as those, but you don't know, you don't know if there's any foundations or anything like that, right?
I don't think
There
so.
are no. it's
I
just
think
blocks.
there's some mafia blocks
Yep.
with hoop houses.
Yep.
There may be an old Quonset hut,
Yep.
you know.
So you're not gonna have to dig anything
style.
up.
No, I think that's even on.
Is
I
it?
saw the
Is it?
picture, yeah.
I was wondering if you gotta start digging stuff up, is that gonna change?
It's, no, it wouldn't because we're not dealing with any wetland soils
Right.
there. It's pretty much
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say a gravelly
No, but
soil.
it's highly disturbed. Look back at the photographs, see back in '70s, it's been disturbed. There were people parking on it. There's light activity from this side coming into that back area.
Willowbrook Drive has been kind of
Well, yeah.
Quasi construction yard.
an orphan.
Well, when I saw the pipe jacking, I'm sure they might have used,
Karen, I'm sure Ernie was pushing.
yeah, exactly.
So that's what we're proposing. Really, our flood, when you look at our flood study or our drainage study, we've really dealt with the back area. We've broken it into two areas. Part of the site is flowing into this water quality swale, and then the rest of it is flowing in here. We're overcompensating, but basically no water leaving that area. So reducing flows by about 20%.
So at this point, I'll work with the applicant to try to clean things up as best we can, the existing
Yep.
conditions, and
We'll find a place for those if we can.
Now,
we can. We can.
You want on vacation?
so I just have two questions.
Sure.
So that flood storage area serves, it has the capacity to serve two purposes: to provide compensatory storage for the floodplain, and to provide additional negative volume, if you will, for the advancing of fill into the floodway.
This has got a hydraulic rating of B. Typically, obviously A to B, so I don't see that water sitting in there more than 6 hours before it drains out into space. So we're not going to lose any flood storage by it.
And it just, in my ignorance, it's appropriate to put compensatory storage in a floodway for the floodplain.
It's really more restriction is wetlands than it is floodway.
I'm sorry.
We've done that before. We just did the Colliers project where we did compensatory storage in that wet meadow that George designed on the river bend.
which compensated for the flood storage that was up by BWC tool.
Okay, and that was in the floodway.
Right.
Okay, so that's common practice.
Right.
All right, thank you.
And Bill, in a situation such as this, when we're looking at the volume of flood storage that we have and the runoff that's generated versus the peak flows of the big storm coming down through Willowbrook, Bart had mentioned that, this thing is going to be emptied out probably well before the peak flood comes down.
This has got, you're talking hundreds of CFS runs. They're probably 12 to 24 hours after the peak storm happens in Britain, it'll finally peak out in this location. Similar to what happens to floods and what happens to Manvest and Centertown. This is very similar to what's happened in the west end of the Britain. It flows down through and out. So this thing is going to be well drained and well gone before.
Thank you.
What's going in the addition bar is just
It's
storage?
just addition. You need more room. They want to kind of formalize the drive-through.
Not gonna put any bathrooms or anything like
And
that?
maybe a bathroom. I think I saw there's a sewer easement.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Well, let me ask you a quick question about the parking, not that it's again germane to the wetlands application. And you're adding the additional parking based upon the zoning requirements of the addition.
Right.
I know when I drove out there, driven by a couple of times, the parking lot is probably a third full, the existing parking lot. So those extra spaces are really being driven by.
That's the decision that the owner and PDS Construction will make. Maybe they'll get a waiver.
Yeah. Okay.
I know we are showing some future parking idea. We're not planning on something that, but eventually show it in that area.
Yep.
So that maybe it will pull back, but I'll discuss that with you.
Yep.
So just make a motion to continue.
Continue it.
Yeah. Need a motion to continue this application to next meeting?
Make the motion.
Can I have a second? All in favor? See you next. Yes.
Okay, as far as other business, we have nothing else on the agenda unless anyone on the board has something they want to bring up. Likewise with correspondence, we haven't received anything new over the past month.
I know that a couple of people couldn't make it. I know Mr. Russo couldn't make it.
Correct. He has another obligation. I think a work-related
I
obligation.
think that's what he said last time. He thought he had something. I talked to Dave, but we couldn't make it. What about Steve? Is he? Did he get? He did not. Okay, so we're down
1, 2, 3, 4, 5,
Five.
6, 7. We're down
two
spots.
spots and two alternates.
No, just 2 spots.
2 spots, okay.
Well, I think 1 is an alternate, and 1 is a,
What do we have to have, 7?
7 is
Okay.
7 is the full committee with 2 alternates.
Okay,
It's counting 5, 6, 7.
Yeah, right.
2 aren't here.
I won't be here in May.
Okay.
well, right now, unless,
We should be all right.
Yeah.
You won't be here too. So we're getting close to being all right.
Lisa,
Well, I'm assuming he got it. So
I can't sound what I'm saying.
Who said they weren't gonna be here? Oh, great. Well,
may not be really well. We don't, the only new application we have is the one. that's
Just took, yeah.
We may have to make.
The appeal. We might have the appeal.
That's not gonna.
That'll be 4 or 5 years down the road with the court.
Yeah, I think the court, if it goes there, it goes like that, court can look at it. Sorry. Oh, yeah, can I have a motion to adjourn? Second? All in favor? All right.
We can all go to stop.